What's up, Liz? How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How's your morning going?
It's good. I just saw your Zoom invite and I was like, what a wonderfully great German name. I didn't realize it.
Oh, yeah, it's German for strong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a guy tell me that I was in the gym at about 16 years old, and he's like, I had it on my hockey sleeve, and it said
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're strong." And I was like, I had no idea what he was talking about. It was awesome. I'm like, oh, cool. That's kind of cool, and yeah, so that's
Yeah.
where it stemmed from.
Yeah. Even David, like, it's a very German name. Like, yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
I don't think I have any German. And like my grandparents aren't German. I don't know. Interesting.
Well, it's so funny though, because it's like things change, right? People like just because like where are your grandparents from?
I don't know. I'm a mix of Europe, like just white European, so like Scottish, English.
Yeah. I know I'm a
Yeah.
big nut too. When I did mine, it's like, you belong nowhere. And I was like, oh great. Like, I'm like mostly like Czech and German French because my mom's French, but German and
Okay.
French are the same thing.
Mm.
It's the same area, it's the same type of people genetically. So it was kind of funny. I was like, great, I'm 20% something at the most. Awkward. Basically, I'm always culturally appropriating, or either that or I belong to everyone. So it's I don't
Hey,
even do with it anymore.
yeah, you're just keeping everything balanced.
Exactly.
Well, Liz Gleadle, first of all, thank you very much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about what you do, who you are, and how you've been able to be this incredible javelin thrower, among other things. You're winning the morning with Airbnb. Tell the listeners a bit about what you're doing with that before we dive into you as an athlete.
Sounds good. My plug before it all starts.
Yeah, exactly. Sell before you even.
So I've been hosting this event called Win the Morning on Airbnb since about June. And it happened because I was reached out to by several athletes on the Canadian Olympic Committee who had been in contact with Airbnb, who had become an International Olympic Committee partner. And so there's new rules around partnership with the International Olympic Committee. It has to benefit the athletes very visibly and very obviously. And so Airbnb has helped to create athlete experiences, Olympic athlete experiences on their platform. Which means sometimes some people are doing goal setting or trigger point therapy, or you can sail the virtual seas with a sailor. There's a lot of really cool experiences. And so mine is how to have a great morning routine and how to make it a really effective but short morning routine. So the whole point is that it is based around a minimum effective dose, because a lot of people will not do something because it just seems to take too long and it's too much to commit to and just start. And the starting is the most important thing. So if you determine how long it takes to get a minimum effective dose, like how long is it before it's effective, then you can just do it, know it's effective, and get on with your day instead of being hard on yourself. So my morning routine has 5 things in it. It has drinking a beverage, so salt water, lime, first thing in the morning. It's doing 90 seconds of exercise, and I explain the science behind why and why it's effective. We do a cold shower, so everybody kind of walks away, excuses themselves, and walks back, and it only needs to be a minute to be effective, and I explain the mechanisms behind why and how to take a cold shower and not panic. And then we go into some journaling, which is just about setting your mindset and choosing the direction that you want for your day before answering other people's pleas for attention. And so that's supposed to take about 3 minutes. And then lastly is meditation. And meditation is actually effective after 1 minute. And so a lot of people often just feel like they're constantly failing because they're thinking. And we go through how a 1 minute meditation can be effective, what physiological changes happen, and how, the greatest barrier to meditation is often the setup, getting a pillow, getting a timer, getting your little space all set up. And we often don't feel like we have 5 minutes, but we do have 1. And so the whole morning routine is supposed to take no more than 15 minutes. And the whole point is that you want to get going and get to the thing that you want to do. And you want to feel like you're hitting the ground running. And that's what it's designed to do.
I love it. Doing the research, I listened to your interview with Natalie Allport on her All In project. And I was going through, and the 5 steps that you talked about, there are steps that I've actually implemented into my morning routine. And then, so when I was doing the research, I'm like, man, this is so cool. I started doing this, and Obviously it's worked for you and paid dividends. The cold showers is something that I love to do. Was that inspired Wim Hof? Do you pull any of that, draw it in, or what's the background on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been doing ice baths since I was 15. That's just
Nice.
that's just a part of the track and field life.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things, I only did it for the concept of muscle recovery. I wouldn't do it for any other reason. And then I remember, I think he was interviewed on Joe Rogan in 2015. And that's when I was like, I'm doing it. I don't care. Like, give me all the research. I'm super into this. And I was going for like 20-minute cold walks in -20 in Alberta and doing my cold showers every morning. Like, I've been on this trend for a long time. And it's interesting though, because like Wim Hof breath is very active and it can be like quite intense. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is too much for me first thing in the morning. Like, if I want to do it, the chances that I do it if I use that breath are lower. And so I was like, okay, how do I do this in a way that is calming and that makes me it's just easier for me to take a cold shower. So the whole point is like, you have to make it easy for yourself to do something difficult first thing in the morning. And maybe start off with calming breaths. And then maybe you get to like a 3-minute cold shower and you're like, you know what, I could try the Wim Hof breath. This seems like a little more intense and the next step. But the whole point is that you have to start and get into that starting place. So yeah, I'm huge fan of the cold shower. I go for swims in the ocean. I went for one the other day. It was like 7 minutes. People were looking at me like I'm totally but
That's awesome. I don't have the breathing down yet. I just jump in and I brace and I just got to control it. And that's my mental. I feel like I'm building that mental strength up as I just suffer through it. And maybe it's not the right way to do it, but for me,
I'll teach you how to do it.
There we go. Perfect. I will. It'll be well worth the $40. So, okay. The Airbnb, it's cool. I love the way that you're able to share your knowledge and insights with other athletes, with individuals. It doesn't have to necessarily be athletes. It's anyone who's interested. And I think it's a fantastic way for you to create this little side hustle that you got going. So good for you on that. I want to bring up this quote that you have tattooed that is, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars. Yeah. It's the motto and message that you have, that you built it off of. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, it was actually given to me on a necklace when I was 15, after I won national championships for the first time. And it's interesting. It's very representative of my attitude a lot of the time, because it's a good reminder. Sagittarius. I'm kind of like, if you read the definition of Sagittarius, you're like, oh, that's Liz's personality. Strange. Like, and it's funny because the Sagittarius is a centaur pointing at bow and arrow up at the stars. And it was like, how fitting. And the whole point is that I get really excited about things, and not as much anymore, but I really used to get too excited, not think things through, and then just dart after it and kind of not have my ducks aligned before, diving into something. But it's always this concept that you have to think big, and it's so important to dream big and to think of something that scares you a little bit, because if it's not providing a little bit of fear, like that fear is an indication that you're stepping into the unknown, which is the only way that you're going to have an interesting and creative life. And that taking that step, and it's like you're walking off a cliff and you're trusting that it's like Indiana Jones, when like all of a sudden he takes that step and then he realizes there's a bridge in front of him and it's been there all along. He just needed to trust it. So the quote's really about, this reminder that you have to put in the groundwork, but then you have to trust that you just got to give it a shot. And it's actually funny. It wasn't supposed to be this big. The tattoo covers like a good chunk of my ribs. But the reason it's so big is because I blew it up and I wanted every single letter to be something I love. So I think it's about 4 different fonts mixed together. Oh. And, I spent so much time like getting the font just right, every letter just right, that I forgot to shrink it after. Didn't even question me, and I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what I'm getting, and I like just didn't even think about it. So it's kind of funny, again, maybe keep your feet on the ground and check that that's exactly the size you want your tattoo before you get it posted on you. But
well, it's funny. I bring it up because I rarely am ever keeping my feet on the ground right now. So I was interested to hear from your perspective why you got it. And so I want to bring what we're doing with the Athletes podcast is bringing on a variety of athletes from a variety of backgrounds, whether it's hockey players, basketball, javelin throwers, for instance, with yourself. I don't want to be the stereotypical, how do you get into javelin? Because we covered that kind of previously in our first chat, but you go through, you're a fast pitch, fastball player, you're a pitcher, and you get involved, you get your arm going, you realize you've got a bit of an arm, you go through elementary school, you're the one that doesn't throw the javelin poorly, you actually get it off, you don't hit it in the back of your head, like you said, your teacher's like, oh, you're actually pretty good at this. So I'm interested to hear from your perspective how you get into an individual sport so specialized as javelin, and how you excel in it, because it's not an easy sport to just jump into out of nowhere. You don't typically see javelin poles laying around for people to just play with. It's not a typical sport. So where's the grassroots from it, and how did you find your passion for it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like javelins aren't just like laying around like dodgeballs ready for anybody to grab and like mess around with, right? It's like, maybe we do some adult supervision here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my gym teacher just kind of like, she's like, you should really try out for the track team. And, I was just kind of having fun with it. That was really the big thing. I was playing a ton of different sports. And when I ended up competing in grade 10 and winning national championships through a series of, oh, interesting, we have provincial championships. I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, congratulations, you've won provincials. You get to go to nationals. And then you win nationals and you're like, oh, this is a whole different world. And so, I often think about this, and, javelin is not something I even really knew existed, quite literally. And I think there's so many things like that. And the biggest thing that I've learned from becoming good at javelin is that everybody has a specific little niche that they can fall into. And just because you're not, you don't end up playing basketball at the best level doesn't mean you can't transfer so many of those skills you've learned into something else. And it's not even sports, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, I've been doing track and field for a long time. I'm 32 and I'm going to retire in the next year or two. And when I do, it's like, okay, what skills have I learned from throwing javelin, from doing mental training, from, working on a program, to having injuries? How do I translate those to the real world, to real, like, different skills? And what is my unique niche? And that's kind of the biggest thing, that it's like, that's what I've realized through doing track and field. And that's what the passion is like, I can create this niche, and it doesn't have to be something people expected of me. It should be something that I'm truly well fitted to. So the individual sport really was that thing of, I love doing my own work. I love studying nutrition. I love looking into the research of why cold showers work. I love figuring out my own visualization process. And it's this aspect of control that really draws me to track and field. There's that team sport vibe of support. We're all there together. We're all training together. But at the end of the day, you are the thing that is driving the bus, and you are the thing that determines your own success. So I love that aspect of control. I think teamwork is amazing. I can still obviously work in teams, but I love going after something and being kind of in the lead and in control, and kind of like the lead manager of something.
Yeah, you're running your own ship. You're in control. You're the captain. I'm the captain now, and you've got
Indeed.
So that was one of the things that was also brought up in that conversation, is the individual sport versus team sport, the dynamics that are associated with being an individual athlete compared to team. And I'm always fascinated at how athletes can work together and have this amazing result as a team. And it's incredible when everyone comes together and you've got 15 other players to share this gold medal or silver medal or whatever it's with together, compared to as an individual, it's all on you. You either win or lose, and there's no one else to look at but yourself at the end of the day. Can you talk about the pressures that are associated with that? Because you've played both, you've done both. How do you deal with that, manage it, and come to terms with the fact that you are responsible for your end result?
I mean, that's a really interesting thing about it, is the years where you fully commit yourself, or you feel like, if you get to your competition season and you're like, I've done everything that I felt like I should have done and could have done within reason. And when you get to those seasons, if you didn't perform well, it's like, you can truly say like, well, you know what? I did everything I could have. But most of the time, when you've done everything you like, that of within your power, it does go well. Like, it does happen. And so the years where something didn't happen properly, I remember very clearly being like, I messed up. Like, I shouldn't have done this thing. I made the wrong choice, or I wasn't consistent, or, you know, I was letting someone else take over a certain aspect, and then I wasn't as heavily invested because I delegated instead of being responsible. And there is a time to delegate. Like, obviously, like, I cannot physiotherapy myself. I require someone else to do that. But like, you know, like, I'm not relying on other people to do my mental prep. Like, that's on me. Like, I have to know myself, and that's on me to like find a sports site to help me, and that's on me to create a consistent routine. And so the more I found that I've taken control, the more it works out, because you're never getting there and then you're unsure of whether or not you did a good job. You're like, no, I did a lot of things to build, and I'm confident that the work I did added up. And so it's that kind of concept that makes it so that it's not scary if it falls apart. You feel like it's like, you know, it's not my fault. It's like something didn't fate happen, or okay, what lesson am I not learning that I need to look for because of this failure? Like, what am I obviously missing?
It was interesting when you brought up in our last conversation about when you were going into events, you knew going in prior to how you were almost going to perform. You could feel it. You could sense the fact that, you know what, I'm prepared. I've done everything I could. I know that 5 athletes out, I do this. At 3 athletes out, I get ready. I get into my throwing gear. At 1 athlete out, I grab my javelin, whatever it is. And it's this state of preparation and confidence that almost gives you the ability to just, you don't even have to think about it, right? It goes down to the muscle memory, and you start performing in it. You know, athletes refer to it as being in the zone, quote unquote. And I think that that zone is so undervalued or underappreciated in the world of sport now. And it gets brought up all the time, and it's almost like a buzzword now, but right? Is that not, do you find that as well? But I think it's something that people don't focus on enough, even still.
Well, I think the problem is that a lot of people don't understand how to train it and train it, right? And like, we've all been in a place where it's like, you know, like, say you're driving a car and you're trying to like race somewhere, right? And you're like, I'm late. You are in the zone. You are hyper focused. You were like, you're going somewhere, right? Like, that's a zone, so to speak. It's a performance zone because you're trying to do something well quickly. And it's high stakes because you're moving fast. So your brain gets into that zone. So it's a good analogy for what it feels like. But we often don't kind of, you know, prepare to be in that zone and to be there in a state of calm. And really, when people are preparing for their meet, they're like, they don't see themselves walking on the field. They don't see what the crowd is going to be like. They don't think about what they're going to feel, whether they're going to be sweaty, how it's going to feel when they like do that first move, what it's going to feel like when they warm up, who's going to be there. And these are all things that help create a very clear picture. And part of being in the zone is almost like being in deja vu. And you get there and you feel like you've already done it before, because you've done it in your mind so many times before the event that it almost feels like you're fulfilling a destiny. And that's kind of what the zone feels like. It feels like it's supposed to happen, and it feels like you're supposed to be there. And so it's the difference between not being frantic necessarily, like you're now racing your car to an appointment that you're late for, but being like present and knowing that you are in control and knowing how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I kind of get chills when I think about it now, you know, as an athlete from competing. Pan American Games 2015, you come back from 3rd. It's the last throw of the day. You sent me the video. I watched it. I got chills watching it. We'll include it in the show notes. But as you're describing the emotion of going through feeling in the zone, can you take us through what it was like winning that gold medal, throwing the 60+ meter throw against 60-kilometer-hour headwinds, and what it felt like being that last competitor to throw with nothing else going on the track, only you, the Canadian home atmosphere behind you? Take us through what those emotions felt like.
Yeah, so it was interesting because I remember I woke up that day and like I did my little morning routine that that I promote now. I really had like a lot of routines. Like I had, the same kind of thing for breakfast. I did my morning routine. I did my visualization. I did my meditation. I wrote out what I wanted for my day. And I remember going through the track and it was like, I'd already taken that bus to the track for warm up before. So I knew exactly where I was going to sit on the bus. I knew like what I was going to feel like. I knew that my friend Alana was going to be with me. I knew where my parents were going to be in the stadium. And these were all things that it's like, it's not a surprise when you get there. It makes you comfortable, because the more you see something, the more you make it something that feels like it's already happened, the more comfortable you feel in that environment. It doesn't feel hostile to you, and it doesn't induce fear, it induces calm. And so I remember getting there and I was leading a lot of the competition and it was going well. And there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to perform well. I was like, my body feels tapered. I know I know how good I feel. I just need to perform the way I've been performing even when I'm tired. So today should be even better. And I just knew, I was like, I'm for sure going to perform well today. Like all the factors are aligned. I know I've done the work. This isn't some fluke thing where I need to kiss a necklace and look up at the sky before I throw. It's like, I've done the work. And so then the Brazilian and the American passed me. And I remember, like, normally when I hadn't been doing this work, when I hadn't been having this consistent routine in my life of visualization, knowing what's going to happen, giving myself these cues, what would happen is that I would panic if someone passed me. And I'd be like, oh no, what if I don't make it? And then I start catastrophizing all the bad things that could happen instead of thinking, what could all the good things that could happen? And instead of my mind going to this place of panic, my mind went to this place of, oh yes, this is the moment that you wait for. This is the moment that you crave, where you get to take it in the last round. Like, what an amazing opportunity. Because I already know I'm going to perform well. It's just a matter of like, now it's even better. This is the universe lining up everything that I wanted for myself for this meet. And so I remember I got on the runway and there wasn't like a shred of doubt in my mind. And I started getting the crowd pumped up. And I remember like it got so loud. And I've had crowds cheer for me at the Olympics and stuff, but when you know every single Canadian in the stands is yelling for you, and you know that there's people at home looking at their TV because it's the only event on at the track, and you know it's probably one of the only events on in Pan Am's, you know there's a lot of people who have your back. And it was kind of just this big push that I was like, okay, it's gonna happen. And I remember going down the runway and thinking like, oh great, the wind isn't blowing super hard right now. It's like, it's kind of consistent, because what would happen is the wind would hit and then it would cut and you'd fall down on your face almost. And so a bit of like luck on the runway as well, that the wind was like consistent. It was a strong headwind, but it was a consistent strong headwind. And I remember like right before I released the Javelin, like everything's torquing up through your body and you feel like everything is going up, up and up into your hand instead of like through some small point in your back. Or, you know, like you're twisting to the left and you're losing some of that torque to the side. Everything just felt like it funneled into the spear. And I remember like the moment it left my fingers, I was like, that's it. That's the one. And I knew I'd won even before it landed.
Well, and you said even you described the way, the emotion that was shared by the Canadian fans when you could tell after the Javelin had landed, despite them not even sharing what the distance was yet, you knew based on the reaction of that crowd that you had won, you know, after throwing it. It's incredible just to imagine what that sensation would have felt like. So 2015, you compete, you win this gold medal at the Pan Am Games, you're on this huge high. I want to bring to light some of the, obviously it's a negative topic in the injuries, but I want to shine light on what's happened throughout your career, because you've faced more than one injury. You've overcome these substantial injuries and still performed at an extremely high level despite them throughout a couple different events. So I want to kind of have you share how you were able to overcome these different injuries and what that mental strength looked like and how you were able to really ensure that you could still perform at your top level despite maybe not feeling the greatest or having your body at its 100% level.
Yeah. I think a lot of it really comes down to, like, I've been told a lot of my life that I'm not an exceptional athlete. Like, I am very gifted with height. I'm 6'1". I'm pretty strong, but I haven't always been a very explosive person or an overly coordinated person. And the ankle sprains speak for themselves. But and like things have happened to me. So to share the ridiculous list of strange injuries that I've had, like again, amongst the 15 ankle sprains, quite literally, I've been hit by a track and field hammer thrown by the men's Canadian record holder, a 16-pound ball flying at a speed that would get it to almost 80 meters. Then that happened in January of 2012, still made the Olympics and still made the Olympic final. I had a spinal cord injury in 2016 after doing some cleans, forgetting to hook grip, and then launching myself off the platform and landing on my hip so hard that it damaged my, or I guess jolted my spinal cord. And it completely ruined my coordination for about 3 months. And that was in March of 2016. And I was slated to probably be a medalist, a top contender for medalist in 2016. And the videos were incredible in the lead up before I got injured. And then I ended up just, I think I came 16th, but people just thought, oh, what happened to Liz? I guess she's not performing that well this year. When in reality, I spent 3 months just not being able to coordinate my legs to throw. I had a back injury in 2013. That was horrendous. I actually had to take 10 months off of everything training. I wasn't allowed to run, throw, jump, sprint. The heaviest weight I lifted was 10 pounds, and that was after 6 months of rehab and a lot of really painful ripping through my rib cage, which my amazing physiotherapists figured out. Like, some people thought I would need to get like Prolo shot into my hip, or that I needed some kind of surgery to tighten up tendons, or that I was just done and my back was totally screwed. And they're like, no, it's your rib cage, and the fascia around your rib cage is pulling your hips out of place. And so we had to retrain that. And then when I came back from that, I had been only throwing javelin for about 2 months. Again, no lifting, no throwing, no lifting, no jumping, no sprinting. It was just javelin and rehab. And I PB'd by 3 meters. So there's all these things that have happened, but kind of the common thread between the recovery of all these injuries is the fact that I've realized that little things make a really big difference. And the little things being, it's not just eat, train, sleep. All gains are made of recovery, and how you approach the situation and how you create the self-definition for yourself, and looking after all the little things, they add up more than people think. So it's really like when I was recovering from my hammer throw, I visualized twice a day. I did 6 ice baths a day. And I got back to training as fast as I could. And having the mental fortitude to do that is more important than being a freak and being an amazing, like genetically gifted athlete, right? And if you have the mindset, that's the biggest thing that, that's the difference. And there's the combination of people who are freaks and they have the mindset. And there's people who have the mindset, but, they might not have like enough genetics to get them to where they need to be in that specific event. But it creates these incredibly mentally strong people who find workarounds. Because if there was only one way to do it, we would have a problem. And there's so much difference in human variation that you can really harness this mindset, or harness any kind of mindset, and be creative and, make the little things add up in your favor. And always thinking that, like, I'm not athletic enough isn't going to do you any favors. If you're not athletic enough, find a way to become more athletic, or find a way to be like, I have a really long arm for a whip, so I'm going to maximize this because, maybe I'm having a really hard time pushing the athleticism piece. And so there's more than one way to skin a cat, basically.
Yeah. I relate it back to when you said earlier, you love the little details that give you that extra 1%, and that 1% of a 65-meter throw is still 65 centimeters at the end of the day. And if you can do 1% every single day, that's getting better and applying that knowledge that you've gained. You talked about earlier, you're not the 20-year-old athlete anymore, right? So you've got to use that knowledge that you've obtained over the years and instill good habits that are going to create a more effective individual long term. And despite the tough times, despite the unfortunate injuries that have happened, you've been able to do that, and it's incredible. So kudos to you for that. I think it's very impressive. I have to bring up, a couple of buddies and I in grade 12 decided that it was a good idea to, we had to fulfill a PE credit, I believe it was. So we decided that we were going to throw javelin. And it was, and I didn't share this with you the first time. So we went to our local meet in South Surrey, British Columbia, which you're familiar with. And I came 9th. So I missed out going to provincials by 0.27 of a meter.
Oh,
but to give people perspective on just the difference of a professional athlete throwing a javelin compared to a 12-year-old, 180-pound male, I threw 28 meters, and I was a baseball player, and I wasn't a baseball player, but I was an athlete. I was like, right? So I was a decent athlete. I was, whatever. And man, I could not believe the fact that I could only get that freaking javelin 28 meters and I missed out on going to provincials. Granted, I did not deserve to go to provincials. I didn't do any training. This was all for fun. But I want to give people a perspective on like what you throwing 63, I believe your record is what, 63 point something, your PB right now. Like that is double what I was capable of throwing. And like, I just think it's incredible what you are able to do and continue to strive toward that 65-meter goal, I believe is what you're striving for now, right? How do you...
Putting into more perspective, my grade 11 throw was 50 meters.
Oh, man. Well, we could have left that part out, but I guess now we'll just... well, really put me to shame. Grade 11 too. God, good thing we weren't in school at the same time. That would have been tough for me to come to terms with. Okay, so let's talk about Lethbridge because you have to train out in Lethbridge. You're exposed to the elements. You've got to, grind out Canadian winters and Canadian environment compared to, a lot of other athletes are training in Phoenix, training in different climates that are super nice, ideal conditions. You throw in 5% farther because the wind's lighter. Like, explain what kind of mental fortitude that provides to you as an athlete so that when you go into a competition, if you do face those 60-kilometer-an-hour headwinds, how you are comfortable and prepared to do that. And it doesn't make you a nervous wreck compared to some of those diva athletes that it might completely throw off their game.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. So Lethbridge has some pros and cons. One, we get to throw indoors all winter, which is hard looking at a wall all the time because, you feel like you're going crazy. Just throwing into a net, into a wall, into a net, into a wall, and just being focused on this spot. But it does create a very consistent training program during the winter. During the summer, though, I don't know why, but the wind just loves picking up about 30 minutes before my scheduled practice. It's like that seems to be the time. It's like 3 p.m. is like the wind starts picking up. And
sounds like you should start training at 2:30 then.
I know, you really should. But it's hard because we'd be training. The old system that I used to be on is that we train 10 times a week between Monday and Friday. And you're outside, you were throwing at 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. And you need that time in between. And you also don't want to push it too late. And it's this whole system. And so we'd get there and we'd throw, and sometimes the wind would be so strong, we'd have to cancel practice at one point because if it gets too strong, your shoes start clicking together because it pushes your feet and you have these enormous 1 centimeter spikes. And I've actually like stepped into my shoe and pinned myself into the ground like a little cork board and like fallen flat on my face. So you really kind of...
That felt good.
Oh no, it was awful. I looked up at my coach. I was like, I think practice is over now. So there's a point that you have to call it, but you do have to figure out how to throw with the wind. And you have to figure out to throw like, okay, if I'm throwing with a headwind, like how do I change the javelin angle? Or if I'm throwing with a tailwind, how do I make sure that my feet are still out in front of me so that I can create this long pull on the javelin because I'm over top of it. I have no block and I'm not behind the thrower. So you really start playing with those minutia of, okay, the elements are pushing me out of place. And then when you get to a meet, you're like, people are like, oh man, it's so windy and it's sideways. And you're like, I know how to deal with this. Like, and everybody else is worried. And you're like, well, yeah, it's not optimal. But the point isn't like, yes, sometimes the point is to throw as far as humanly possible. And sometimes the point is to win. And it's important to differentiate that sometimes those days, it's like you may not throw a personal best because conditions are not ideal. Especially when you've been throwing for so long that like your personal best really is something of like amazing ideal conditions coming together. And so you need amazing ideal conditions to do it again. But at that point where you get to a competition and you're like, well, I've dealt with this. And, it helps you on those days where it's really windy or in Vancouver, it's really rainy. And you're like, I remember thinking like you're training there and you're like, well, you know what? Now I know how to deal with this. And there's some people who won't know how to deal with it. And that's really important that even if you're competing in an environment where it's like, okay, you're a high school athlete and everybody's competing in Vancouver, some people go into the rain and they're just so miserable before they even start. And if instead you go into that rain and you're like, I know how to handle this, and like I've worn layers, I've prepared, I know how to like breathe to heat myself up. I understand that like cold is just cold, it's discomfort, it's not pain. Like all these things kind of add up to this mindset where you kind of just let it roll off your back. And it's just a lot easier to focus on the performance and the best possible performance under those conditions instead of worrying about it not being your optimal performance.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing that I took for granted growing up in Vancouver, British Columbia, is the fact that I don't get nervous about going in the rain. And there's a lot of people out a little softer out in Ontario that don't like it.
Yeah, because they're like, I remember people like in Ontario, like, oh, Vancouver, you're not experiencing the real winter. It's like, yeah, but we don't have any indoor training domes because it's not cold enough, quote unquote. And people don't realize that it's like we actually spend quite a bit of time outside when it's other people would go inside because they have the facilities.
Yeah.
So we're only now starting to get kind of facilities like that, but realistically, there's not really anywhere great to train indoors in BC. No, not true. Kamloops. There's a great center.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of places where we don't have indoor facilities. People train outside all the time for all kinds of sports.
And it's a damp cold in BC too. People don't reckon, like it's just as bad. I don't even mind the Ontario winters out here. I can handle it. So I want to actually share a bit of what it feels like to go to the Olympics, because this is something that only a few select people in the entire world get to experience. And it's this amazing culmination of the best athletes in the world coming together, competing all in one region, city, area. How crazy is that to experience? What are some of the highlights that you take from, you've experienced a couple Olympic Games now? Can you take us through what it feels like to be there with all the athletes, the Olympic Village? I want to know from your perspective.
Well, it's interesting. I remember the first time I qualified, it was at this, I hit my second mark. I threw 61 meters in 2012. And I remember my coach was actually officiating the meet. So he was trying to be as like calm and impartial as possible. And like I'd moved there, I'd given my whole life to get there. I still think it's hilarious that he didn't even like, break facade on his face. He's like, yes, 61 meters, just like announcing the mark. And I was at this small meet in Calgary, and I remember like I made it. I was like, wait, what? Like, how did you say that calmly, right?
Yeah.
Just like freak out. I'm so happy. And I remember like I walked to my car and like, I drove up from Lethbridge. It's a 2-hour drive. Like I had all like my clothes strewn across my car from like staying at my friend's place that night before, and like just like, kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit. And I remember I got into my car and I just started like breaking down and crying because I was like, I can't believe how much I've come through just to like make this point. It's like, I can't believe like I stopped my degree. I ran away from my like family and friends to go train full time. I've been training 10 times a week. I got hit by a flippin' hammer and Canadian record by 3 meters, and I'm going to the Olympics. And I was like, wow, I can do anything I want to. Like that was a point. I was like, I can't do everything, but I can do anything I set my mind to. And so it was really interesting when I got to the Olympics, anybody who is their first team, it's really exciting. You're all together and you kind of look at people and you're like, I know that you went through something really similar to what I just went through. I know that you went through this huge emotional journey and this huge commitment. And it's, when you share that with people, it's really interesting because you immediately know you have something incredibly special in common. And you share that with every single person on the Canadian team. You share that with every single person in the Olympic Village. I don't think it's easy for anyone to get to the Olympics. Like you can be a freak, but you still have to beat the other freaks in your event. And so when you get there, the neatest thing to me about the first Olympic Village was that I could walk up to anybody and just start talking to them, and it didn't feel weird in any way because you immediately know. You're like, oh, what do you do? Because I know we're both Olympians, so it's like not weird. Like,
yeah, common ground.
Very common ground, and it's something that you can just assume, and it's not awkward to ask people about it, which is really neat because you're not coming from, you're just coming from a very equal place. And it's like, that's really kind of the most special thing. And then, yeah, just being there, like relaxing, enjoying the vibe. Like London was really amazing. There was an amazing village to walk around in. Rio, not so much. It was more, the village was not very well set up.
Okay.
There was lack of social spaces and lack of ability to quote unquote run into people. So it's either you're at the dining hall or you're at their building, and there was nothing else to do in the village really. So I got to know the Canadian team a lot better, which was really special because we're so well looked after. We have our own like lounge, we have a place to hang out, we have ping pong tables, like we have snack areas. The Canadian team is enormous. It's like 360 athletes. Some teams have 10 athletes. And
Yeah.
so we're incredibly well looked after. So yeah, the social aspect is incredibly amazing. And then being in the competition itself was incredible because I actually I remember I was visualizing myself competing and throwing well and making the final. And I did just that. Like I was the 11th person to make the final, and I was in the first round, and then the second round went, and I was just, you know, biting my nails, hoping that I made the final. And then I remember I made the final, but then I hadn't visualized or planned what it would be like to compete in the final. And I got there and I was like, I'm so spent and so tired, and I don't know what to do right now. And I ended up throwing pretty well. I think I threw like 60 meters, and at the time my personal best was 61, so I really didn't underperform. But I remember at one point thinking like, this is amazing. And then my event hadn't started yet, and I realized the 200-meter final was on during my final, and my event would not start until their event finished. So I went and I stood directly in line with the finish line of the 200-meter final. And I remember I watched like Usain Bolt like run around the track. And I like, it's so interesting because I've watched so many track meets and I know how fast a 200 meter is run, and I see it at nationals. But when you see how fast the best of the world are, and you're standing in the middle and they're running around you, the awe that you have for other people's abilities is just magnified. And you realize like how amazing these athletes are, and that you're also amazing, and you're also in the final, and you're just as good as at what you do. And so it's pretty neat. It's a lot of self-affirmation that you belong there in that moment. So
it's crazy. I'm honored to be able to speak with athletes on this podcast, and I get jitters every time I start talking about it and tell people about, you know, how I'm able to do this. And it's, you know, I say it before, but it's amazing to be able to just share this knowledge and get the insight from you guys. And so I really appreciate it. And I want to actually bring to light the fact that it was interesting. You said you visualized getting to the final, but you didn't visualize once you were in the final. And it shows how important that visualization is. Sorry, it's like crazy to think that, you know, you can get to that point, and you do it throughout your whole career, right? You said that visualization aspect is so important, getting comfortable, knowing exactly how you're going to perform in that position. But standout point, exactly why it's important to go right from square one right to the finish line, and not maybe forget about those last couple steps and how crucial they are.
Yeah. Well, I think I almost thought that like, I was like, well, maybe I could make the final, right? And that was my big goal. And the thing about that is like, it's a limiting belief, right? And maybe I wouldn't have like won the Olympics, right? Like, but like maybe I would have performed a little better if I'd be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do in the qualifier. This is what I'm going to do in the final. And so, you know, it's interesting because I think the biggest thing that stops us from creating these visualizations is shame and fear. And you think, well, who am I to say that, like, to visualize myself in the Olympic final? How audacious. Like, how full of myself do I have to be? And it's just not true. Like, the people who make the most success aren't necessarily the ones who are the most skilled or the most talented or the most inspired. They're the people who are the most audacious, and they dare to dream, or they dare to do something. And, you know, you see that all the time in like the way some businesses are run. It's like, oh, this person has like a gym and they own it, but like it's a garbage gym. It's not well organized, and their membership system is all screwed up, but they have one. And someone else won't even have started their gym because they have such a grandiose idea, and they're so scared that they would dare to open their own gym that like they don't even get started, right? Or they don't even dare to try. And so that audacity is really important, and being like, I belong here, and I deserve this, and I deserve it because I want it. And like, that's okay. It's okay to dream big. And taking those first couple steps and being like, okay, I see myself in the Olympic final. I see myself throwing far. I see myself being calm and confident. And like, I see myself throwing and feeling this amazing feeling of like the energy going straight through my body, and the javelin flying down the field, and the crowd going totally wild, and like having a medal placed on my neck. And like, it's terrifying to like say that out loud to other people too, because other people are like, wow, this person really thinks a lot of themselves. But it's like, that's important if you want high performance. And it doesn't matter if it's in sport, it doesn't matter if it's in school. You have to tell yourself that you deserve it, and you have to tell yourself it's possible. go. Like, don't stop short of what you actually want. Is basically the big thing.
Yeah, you got to speak it into existence. Liz Gleadle, I don't think there's any other way that, wrapping that up. I think that point on audacity is so important. And I think those are some incredibly wise words that I hope people truly listen to. The way we wrap up every episode on the Athletes Podcast is we ask the athlete what their biggest piece of advice would be to the next generation of athletes, how you, Liz Gleadle, would have gone back and what you would have done as a younger athlete to become the best individual that you could be. What would it be for you?
Well, I guess the information didn't exist back when I was an athlete and when I was really young. I wish I'd known more about sleep. I've gotten really, really big into, I've got my Whoop band on. And that's not even the thing. Like, you don't need a Whoop band to register your sleep. They're amazing devices if you're really getting into the nitty gritty, but it's more important to understand what happens. And sleep is so important for learning, basically. It's important for a lot of things. It's important for how the chemistry of your body works, or if you want to recover from a workout and not get like 50% of the gains because you only slept 6 hours. But the biggest thing that has really spoken to me about making my sleep a ritual and something that is sanctified and not to be messed with under any conditions other than like jet lag or some insane amount of money because somebody wants me to wake up at like 4 a.m. to host a Win the Morning. Like, very few things disturb my sleep. And the reason is that if you don't sleep, you don't take those memories that you have from today, convert them into long-term memories, and then convert them into new and creative ideas. And everybody knows that concept of sleeping on it. Like, you're struggling with this idea, or you're doing your sport and just something's not clicking. And then you have like a great sleep, and then one day it just happens and you just get it. This doesn't happen out of magic. This happens because your brain has been working on something subconsciously for a long time. And then in your REM, something that happens in the second half of your sleep, unless you're constantly disturbing it by a really early alarm clock, your REM is the thing that basically makes all these different connections. So for example, in Javelin, I have to drive my right leg into my left. So it's creating this tension into a block. And then I have to leave my arm behind for as long as possible. And often I will drive the right side, but the arm will go with the right side and the arm will create this sling tension. Or I'll leave the arm back, but I'll totally forget to drive the hip. And I'll go back and forth on this for weeks. And then one day it just clicks. And this consistent good sleep is this idea to take these ideas, solidify them, make the connections, and then allow me to create something new, which is coordinating my hip and my arm. And this is just motor learning. That's what it is. Learning technique, learning sport is motor learning. And so if people valued their sleep more, or basically educated themselves enough to understand what REM does, what deep sleep does, why it's important to get, if you're in your late teens, early 20s, 9 to 10 hours of sleep, and how to prioritize that, people would become better at their sport so much faster. They'd save themselves so much time. They'd stop getting sick, and they would hit their peak a lot earlier, and you would gain momentum. And it's kind of funny because COVID is an amazing opportunity not to mess with your sleep cycle. You're not going anywhere anyway. You might as well sleep enough. So that's my biggest thing for younger athletes is if you can, like, the book Why We Sleep is incredible. It's a lot of information distilled from a ton of research, and you'll learn about how alcohol affects your REM sleep. You'll learn about whether you're a night owl or a morning bird. And you'll learn about how eating too late can affect your REM sleep. Like, there's so many things that can affect your ability to learn and maintain information and then transfer it to something new and brilliant. So younger athletes, learn about your sleep, protect it. If you know more information about it, you will be more likely to actually stick with it and care about it.
Boom. If people don't listen to that, they're missing out. Liz Gleadle, thank you very much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. I sincerely appreciate you carving out an hour of your time. I look forward to seeing you continue to pursue your goals. And I know for a fact that you are going to dominate outside of the world of sport once you are finished with it. But for the time being, you're going to continue throwing that javelin as far as possible and keep making Canadians proud.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.